Okay, here we are at the astrology portion of and our Venus curriculum for the month. And oh my gosh, I'm having trouble even deciding where do I begin. And there's just a voluminous amount of stuff happening, both astrologically and energetically. And I was trying to sit down and sort of plan the call because I'm like, or this transmission, because I'm like, there's so much. I don't want to forget anything. Let me write some stuff down. And maybe what I'll do is sort of start with the last few days. So we had the new moon in Gemini, which was square to the planet Neptune, and it is in the last decan of Gemini. So decans are this extra way that astrology and tarot work together, and astrologers will separate each sign into 10-degree slices. So it becomes this way that there's 3 decans inside of each astrological sign. And from a solstice perspective, this is the last decan before the ingress of the sun into Cancer. And we have, that's a solstice point, right? It's a point of measurement. The solstice are kind of like the north and south of the zodiac, whereas the equinox points are like the east and west, the rising and the setting of the sun. The solstice points are like the highest point and the lowest point of where the sun travels. And so at summer solstice, we celebrate in the northern hemisphere the highest point that the sun travels to. So this decan in Gemini is the last little bit of sky or zodiac before we hit the grand celestial event of the solstice. And this decan is related to the um, to the 10 of Swords, and it's called like the Lord of Ruin, right? And it sort of represents this area where we get very mental. So when we're on when we're following the path of the sun, which is what we do in astrology, right? We follow the path of the sun. The sun is reborn at the winter solstice, and it's at its lowest point in the zodiac. And then each month following the winter solstice, the sun rises and it's higher and higher in the sky. That's why daylight hours increase. It's the path of ascension. So it's the path from the root. And we follow this path in our Venus cycle class really closely. It just so happened that everything aligned this year. And when celestial events align in the way that they have, it always increases consciousness because people's bodies pick up, and their level of consciousness pick up on the alignment. And it's not as hard to decipher, or in other words, it's not as subtle, right? So we followed with the Venus path this year, the exact or precise path of the sun in the realm of the ascension gates. They're not always mapped on as perfectly as they have been in our particular cycle that we're in. So the sun grows in light, and that is the symbol of gaining consciousness. And when you go into the main module teaching that talks about the seventh chakra, that's also the journey of the chakras, like coming from unconsciousness in the root, right, from birth all the way up to transcendence. And so the solstice point in Scorpio is that representation of transcendence, that leaving the body and uniting or merging with the heavens. And so this last decan where the new moon happened in Gemini is this kind of idea of the Lord of Ruin. And what it represents is this capacity to get so mental, Gemini, right? And so kind of disembodied or unbalanced from our root chakra that we're spending so much time in the mental realms that our application of a response, right? That our response to a problem becomes bigger than the problem. Like we're generating so much mental energy to attack an issue that it actually, the reaction or response magnifies the problem. So that was kind of the energy at the new moon, and the new moon was squaring Neptune. And what is Neptune? Well, it's very resonant, like we said, with the lunar sphere in the sense that it rules over that idea of spirituality and non-dual awareness and dreams and visions and imagination, yes, but also delusion and illusion. And so adding to the kind of mental chaos that happened at the new moon point was this kind of feeling of either we're dreaming and visioning into a new future with the square to Neptune, or we're being deluded. So the new moon happens, and on the day that the new moon happens, and I'll link this stuff so you can see what I'm talking about. The Schumann resonance, and if you don't know what that is, it's the measurement of the Earth's heartbeat, and it almost precisely maps on to the electromagnetic field that is generated by an individual human's heartbeat. So Heart Math Institute's done a lot of work to look at the Schumann resonance, and there are different places on the planet that track it. Well, the Schumann resonance did a very funny thing, like it shifted patterns dramatically, and it went from its regular looking graph to this almost kind of sacred geometrical graph. And I track it because I can feel the fluctuations in the field. And as we were coming into the new moon point, I wasn't sleeping. And usually I sleep quite deeply during new moons. It's full moons that kind of affect my sleep pattern. And so I'm like, wow, this is really strange. And I'm feeling all this buzzing in my energy. And that Friday, so the new moon happened Sunday, that Friday I had a session with a client. And in the midst of that session, I had this kind of huge wave of deja vu drop in. And if you know me and you've worked with me at all, you know that I am really a practitioner of root chakra work. Like, I think that for one, my Venus star point is in the root chakra. I was adopted. And so there's issues with like incarnation and do I even want to be here and exist as a person? And do I have all stuff that deals with root chakra, like primal attachment stuff. And so I'm not somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about high energy or ascension or, that idea of galactic frequencies. I know people who are very into it. I don't have the kind of makeup where I could be spending time in those realms and not become dissociated from my body. So a lot of my spiritual work, my spiritual practice throughout my life has been more about doing the descent, right? So I'm somebody who's got a really developed crown chakra. Like sometimes if mine becomes out of balance, it's because it's in excess, and like moving down and descending into the body. That's my spiritual work. So you won't normally hear me presence ideas that are very solar or transcendent. It's just not my medicine. And but anyways, the Schumann pattern is going off the charts on the new moon, making this really interesting sacred geometrical pattern that looks very much like DNA. And like I said, I will post a link for you for a picture of it below this video for you to look at the difference between the two. And I'm somebody also, and if you watch the module, you'll see that like I like questions. I like to wonder about stuff. I like to put a pebble in my shoe and just mull stuff over, like, and hold an inquiry and just play with it, tease it out, see what I come up with, right? That idea of kind of like sitting with stuff. And so I was like, this is really interesting. Like, even if it's a glitch, like in the software, it's just the pattern it's making is so interesting. The way I'm feeling in my body. I went on to have several more instances or like episodes, I would call, of deja vu that were just very strange. They had like a feeling tone that like it left a residue almost as it was coming through and leaving. And it was the new moon and like right pre the solstice portal, and so there's lots of other people like me that track the Schumann resonance, and so kind of as a collective community on social media, everybody was getting very excited. And I have felt since then, just because I'm not sleeping well, very tired, and I'm having some kind of strange allergic thing happening, like in my body, where my eyes are like, my body is purging essentially something. My eyes have been watering and it's not normal for me. So I just have been like, wow, this isn't something I pay much attention to, but I've been sort of having it on my radar. One, because we're moving into the solar gateway of Venus's journey. So it's resonant, this transcendent frequency idea. And Venus is going to seed her new cycle in Leo, which is ruled by the sun. So it's this opportunity for me, for all of us, to really merge our like deep embodiment work, like the work that we've done with the kind of dragon medicine is what I'd call it, or the medicine of the rose line, which is very descent oriented. It's dragon medicine. It's the snake, right? With the kind of more like rainbow or luminescence of transcendence, because that's what the solar mysteries rule over, is like real true enlightenment, Christed energy. So I've just been really sitting with this, like, and allowing my body to stew and percolate in whatever this kind of new frequency pattern is in the world, and how my body is trying to kind of like settle into it, but isn't quite comfortable. So I suppose for you, this is an invitation to just kind of drop in, just because so many factors are pointing to it. I'm not somebody who would go, oh, the Schumann resonance is off, and so that definitely means there's something. For one, I think it probably was a glitch, but even a glitch can be symbolic of something or a sign, right? I mean, essentially what this Schumann resonance is doing is tracking the amount of electromagnetic energy trapped between the earth and the top of the atmosphere. And so it's like the voice of Mother Earth in a sense. And we know that plants speak to us. Even science accepts that, like that there's this interaction that happens between humans and plants, that plants are sentient, right? And so to think that that Mother Earth couldn't speak in this way is is silly. So even if it's a glitch, it doesn't mean that she couldn't have been sending a message through the glitch, right? And with Jupiter conjunct the North Node in Taurus, I had written a very tiny transmission. This was right around Tanner's anniversary, so the 5th of June. I'd been spending a lot of time in nature just to help discharge some of the grief I was feeling. And I kept getting this message that like Mother Earth has a very strong message for us. And when I looked at the chart, because I generally will get the message and then I'll look at like what's happening in the sky, right? That's generally like my practice. And so what I saw was that Jupiter in Taurus, the earth, right? And the soma, the capacity for the body to pick up on frequencies, was at that time conjunct the North Node. They're still in a looser conjunction. It's separating now, but they're still technically conjunct. And there's this way that, right, that Jupiter magnifies and allows us to feel and sense and know things that we might not have known if he hadn't done the work of the magnification. And the North Node is always a pointer to where evolution wants to happen, and like where consciousness is being directed in the collective. And so the North Node in Taurus, and the body soma, carnation, right? Karn, Taurus is the bull, carne or karn is like the bull, and incarnation, the word. So there's this like idea with Taurus about being incarnated in the body, in the flesh, right? And the soma, and the way that the flesh is enlivened through eros and through messages, right, from Mother Earth. So all really fascinating. And then a friend of mine sent me a video by Pam Gregory. And again, I don't really get into like channeling stuff or channeling different beings. It's just not because I have the chart. It's just not something I've ever felt like I really needed to drop in with, because I have a map, in a sense, my own map of looking at stuff. But I decided to listen to it. And there's been some other really neat synchronicities that came through with that video. And I actually think that the channeling or the conversation the woman had with astrologer Pam Gregory will really translate well for you. And I was just tickled by it because it was, and of course I'm tickled by it because I'm human, and it felt like confirmation for a lot of the things I had been picking up on. And humans are that way. We like to have our intuition confirmed, right? So maybe I have some kind of bias in there, but I thought it was a really good video, and it's on the solstice. So this is my really long introduction because I wanted to kind of ground us in where we are now coming into this point. So I pulled up the solstice chart, and I pulled up the Venus ingress, the Venus moon portal for the ingress into the moon's gateway. And they're so close together that I think what I'm going to do is just read from the Venus point, our curriculum. There's just so much happening, and I'll begin on the point that we're on. So let me just share the screen real quick. And, oh no, so this is, sorry, I did the solstice. Let me pull up Venus's star point instead. So Venus ingresses into the solar point on the solstice. They're just Venus makes her ingress almost at midnight. And so, oh shoot, what did I just do? Sorry, I'm trying to talk and do technology stuff at the same time, and that never works. So let's try that again. Right. So Venus makes her conjunction almost at midnight on the solstice, but it is technically the same day. This is for midnight, but it's about 11 o'clock-ish. So one of the first things, and this is aside from Venus, but I want to start on this idea that, again, we have Venus moving into her solar gateway on the same day as the solar eclipse. It's another one of those synchronicities. Remember, like we said, with science synchronicities symbols, when things align, they help elevate consciousness because there is a stronger feeling tone that the body picks up on. So people who aren't aware tend to begin to become aware. So there's that synchronicity. And then the other thing that's really interesting is how many planets we have in critical degrees or about to change signs. And so this is one of those things that I wrote down. So when a planet is at a critical degree, which is 29 or the 0 point, it signifies something extra. It adds another punch. It asks us to look more deeply at what that planet is doing. And so many of them, they're not listed here. We're asteroids as well. And the asteroids are goddesses. And so that points to this sort of like feminine awakening, in a sense, like this asking to be awakened. So we have Ceres, who is at the 0 point of Libra, which is part of the cardinal cross, and what I mean by the cardinal cross is the ingress, or the point 0 Capricorn and 0 Cancer. And you know what? I found a way. Let me see if I can do this. Oh no. Here. I found a way to make my my mouse make a color. So let's see if I can get this to go up now. Okay. So you can see my mouse better now, I think. So we have the 0 degree of Capricorn, the 0 degree of Cancer, and you can see the sun right on this line, which that's the solstice points. And then exactly in a cross or a square, we have the 0 degree of Libra and the 0 degree of Aries, which makes what we call the cardinal cross. And the cardinal cross create our cardinal directions. And so having Ceres here at the Libra equinox point, it's the point of descent, right? And in the charts, like where Now, the Libra equinox is where the sun is equal light and equal day. That's what the equinox is. So there's equal sunlight and equal darkness. And then from that point on, from that Libra point on, then the nights are longer than the days. So we call that like the descent part of the chart. And Sirius is sitting there. And so that's an interesting pebble to put in your shoe. Like how closely related are the archetype of Sirius, who governs our capacity to grieve and go inward and have an internal winter. I love that. That's Kate's word. Um, and you know, she is the goddess of and what I mean by internal winter is she grieves so long she stopped greening the world, right? So when we stop greening, stop growing, there is this um there is this action of fallowness, right? So it's like it's drawing attention to, I feel like this polarity of like, yes, there is so much outward ascension energy that's available, but not to forget the inward pull, like that she's marking that. And as one of the great mother goddesses, she really is, she was like one of 6 main goddesses in Rome. She is Demeter, right? Ceres and Demeter are the same person. So a great mother goddess in Greece. She's a very important figure, very motherly. Like she is the one who's got probably the most famous story of being a mother in the world aside from Mary and Jesus Christ. And so she's kind of, and this point is mirroring what her archetype does. Libra, descent. It's the descent part of the chart. Ceres, the capacity to go inward, to grieve, to digest, to compost emotions, to her daughter descended for 6 months out of the year and is very integral to her mythology and her archetype. And so putting that as a pebble in our shoe and remembering that Ceres is really planting a flag in that place to say like, yes, there's lots of ascension energy and there will be, and it will be something interesting and good to focus on and to go with it. You know, there's a strong invitation to go with it and to not forget how important some of the other pieces of our grounded spiritual practices. And so we have her in Libra at this 0-degree point, almost making a trine to Pluto, and the Plutonic energy is very similar. And that again, Pluto is at a critical degree. And then I want to read to you some of the other asteroids that are at a critical degree. So Vesta, the goddess of the hearth fire, she is at 29 degrees Taurus. It's another critical degree. So, you know, as these ascension codes are running, there's going to be, and you'll hear this in the Pam Gregory interview, but I sense this anyways because the new moon was in Gemini. Gemini is always about binaries or like dualities. So there'll be a bifurcation. There's always a pushback. When Watiko, when someone, let me see how I can say this. When someone believes they're encountering Watiko, and what Watiko is this, the idea of a mind virus. What they really do is expose themselves. And so as people notice that there are these people waking up to the truth, you notice that the polar opposite is like the conspiracy theorist archetype was sort of a joke before, right? Like we wrote those people off as like funny, and you know, they had to be pretty extreme for us to call them a conspiracy theorist. We didn't peg everyone as right-wing extremist or left-wing extremist just because they disagreed with us before. I mean, they had to be pretty kind of out there. And now that collective archetype has just basically turned into anyone we don't agree with, they get called a conspiracy theorist or, you know, somebody who is embedded in consensus reality. And these are becoming a dual opposition to each other. And that's part of the shadow of Pluto having moved into Aquarius is because Aquarius rules ideologies and group movements. And so he's going to expose the underbellies of getting pegged down into an ideology. And so while there's this massive division and like bifurcation happening in the collective, Vesta is like anchoring that part in Taurus, that she's the goddess of the hearth fire. And the goddess of the hearth fire, the was the one who tended the temple flame. And it was really important. In ancient times, they used to think of the fire inside of the temple as a divinatory thing. And so if the fire raged inside the temple, it was scary. It was like a bad omen. Or if the fire went out or it got weak or less strong, it was again a bad omen. And so it was a really important job to be the person who tended the fire and kept it just like kind of in the Goldilocks zone, let's say. And with Vesta being at the 29th degree of Taurus, which is a Venus ruled sign, it's about values and resources, how we resource ourselves. Of course, love, because Venus is involved. It's about making sure that we're kind of keeping ourselves in this expansion, in this kind of Stargate or Ascension portal, that we're keeping ourselves in the Goldilocks zone and not allowing ourselves to get dragged out into like different polarities, or even, the idea of, crown chakra versus root chakra is in a sense polarity. So not being just too dissociated or dragged into, and like I said, Pluto and Aquarius, different ideological movements, even spirituality movements have ideologies. There's some people that says the mind is the most important thing, and some people that says the body is the most important. So Vesta is just asking us to kind of keep an eye on the Goldilocks zone. And so then we also have Juno, right? So here again, Juno at the 29th degree of Gemini, and she's in that one decan of Gemini. That's the 10 of swords. And I had an interesting thing happen in my own relationship with my husband, or in communication with him, where there was something that happened at his house that my daughter felt uncomfortable with, and I mentioned it to him, honestly, for his sake, for her sake, because I knew she wouldn't communicate it to him. And she told me she wouldn't, but she felt guilty telling him. And I thought, oh, that's silly. We'll just tell your dad and he won't have that situation anymore and it'll be fine. And boy, was I wrong. So I mentioned it to him and he got very defensive, and it just became this whole thing where it was like all these assumptions were added into it. This is that mental energy of that decan, right? And it was like the response became so much bigger than the thing. And I kept saying, like, all I really needed from you was just to be like, yeah, okay, I hear you. I'll take care of it. That whatever that is won't be an issue in the future. And instead it was just like, I don't know. And Juno is the archetype of marriage and partnership and contracts and how we have our ships in our lives. So, like right now I'm moving into a parentship with my husband, but there's contracts, like as you're in a like a parent-child dynamic with your own parents, or your parentship with your own children, or your relationship with your partner, or your friendship. So Juno rules over that idea of ships, or partnership, in even like it's where we bring duty to our relationships, essentially. And so, she's kind of holding this flag in that 29th degree, saying all of our ships are important. And so in this kind of ascension portal where we're moving through these sort of destabilizing energies, they're a little bit destabilizing. Like, have you ever heard of ascension flu, or like where there's, just high frequency energy going on? It can feel sort of destabilizing. And to tend our ships, right? Like, keep them on course. Don't allow the destabilization of the energy to blow them off course if it's not true. You know, there are times when also her being at the anaretic degree of Gemini can also signify that some relationships will be up for review because they've come to a crisis point. And by crisis, I don't mean actual crisis. I mean that idea of like what a healing crisis is, that just you come to a choice point in a sense. But again, you know, I don't like to advocate for those things. I think that the sky really shouldn't be the thing that dictates that. Really, the truth of our own knowing should be the thing that dictates what we're doing. And so, just for the sake of time, because I can always come back and do more astrology. I love to do the astrology with you guys. I feel like I've been talking for quite a while. My throat is telling me. So just saying that and knowing that instead of going through each one of these other points, there's a bunch of asteroids in the sky that are at a critical degree, aside from the ones that are listed here, just knowing that most of these asteroids are feminine and they're at these very important crisis points, and they are infusing or asking the collective to integrate the feminine current and in a pretty stark and amazing way. It's in other words, it's not normal to have this many asteroids that have the feminine current to them, right? Like we don't have a lot of bodies in astrology that are feminine. We have Venus and the moon, right? And then we try to balance that out by bringing in a couple of asteroids. Their energy isn't as potent, it's more subtle and more narrow in a sense, like ships, you know, like that's one thing, whereas Saturn rules over this huge multivalent conglomeration of stuff. So we've been living in this stew of like really heavy, dense masculine energies. And then so to have these all of these feminine bodies at the crisis points or the critical degrees at the solstice point, which is a very big event in astrology. It was one of the two biggest holidays of the year, and huge celebration because of that idea of the crowning of the sun. Like everyone gets to put their solar crown on, their corona on their heads on the 21st, tomorrow. So there's this, yeah, it's a huge celebration. It's a huge portal. We're all moving through it together. And so to have these feminine bodies at that critical point in the chart, anchoring and holding the chart, waving their flag, is pretty spectacular, right? It's not normal, in other words. So, yeah, the other thing before we move into the Venus part that I'd like to say that I think is pretty neat. So we've covered this idea of the sun growing from the point of the winter solstice. And so that's that idea of waxing, right? Like the moon waxes, hits a full point, and then wanes. It's very much, we're at the full moon point of the sun cycle, essentially, at the solstice point. She's at her brightest, her biggest illumination, and then she goes back inside. Well, for most of the time between the winter solstice and the summer solstice, planets are going forward, which matches the energy of waxing, like growing. And this is outer planets. And then from the point in which we have the solstice, like around the solstice point, the outer planets start to go retrograde, which matches the energy of waning, right? The kind of going more inward time of the year. So we just had Saturn turn retrograde this week, which means so many of the things that he rules in our lives, like structure and foundations and authority and limitation that we run into in the external world with Saturn, will start showing up sort of in the internal world, where we'll hear our own no more strongly, or we'll be running into an internal limitation or a sense of stuckness, or you know, and Saturn's goal with this internal kind of retrograde phase is to really have us release karma, right? Like the way we get to work with Saturn when he's retrograde is to like look at the places where we're stuck or we feel limited or we feel out of balance or we feel a lack of having a foundation or there isn't a quality brick in the wall holding the structure of the wall up with integrity. There's this opportunity to do some work there and shear off some karma so that we get to go along our Saturn path really beautifully. And then next week, Neptune will turn retrograde. And Neptune, just to mention, so where's my little pointer here? So Neptune is squaring this point in the chart. There's nothing here to ground it for you to see the points that I'm referring to, but and then also this part sort of between Mercury and the Juno. So it's in this square to these two parts. And so this is the Milky Way galaxy, so the galactic center. And this is the galactic, or like the great attractor, it's the galactic edge. And these are really important solar system points. And so they speak to this galactic energy. And when a planet is sitting square, it sort of triggers the thing. And so it speaks to this increase in our psychic awareness and our spiritual, our capacity to be in states of spiritual bliss, harmony, happiness, the capacity to dream, to be in a sense of wonderment, and in the capacity to be deluded or to get stuck in a vein of delusion. And so I cannot stress enough the polarity that we're being stretched over with this kind of idea of ascension and expansion and keeping ourselves grounded and embodied and in the frequency of truth. And with this module, and I know we've hit on it before in other in other modules, this idea of being led by the truth, it's really the crown chakra work. And what I mean by the truth, I mean the truth of our true nature. And by true nature, I mean, and I explain this in the module, but I'll explain it here just in case you haven't seen the module first, is like if there was an apocalyptic event and everything that meant anything in our society was desecrated, and so there was no identity that you could pin on, who would you be? Or if you went to an alien planet where none of our accolades and accomplishments and things that we identify with actually exist or have any meaning, who are you? Right? Who are you in that moment? I spoke on the module teaching that I lived in Palestine for several years. I didn't know the language and the customs are very different, and nothing I did in my life here really translated to something meaningful over there. And it really gave me the opportunity to drop in with my true nature, to just get to know myself when I didn't have an identity, right? And so there's this real beautiful inner compass, right? This kind of like rose that blooms in the midst or the center of us that connects us to our lineage and our ancestry in a way that is beyond identification with anything. And it's this compass that can lead us in like allow us to be led by the truth of who we really are and what is really true for us without all of the considerations of our identity, our masks, the things we're attached to, our material attachments, our story attachments, all of that gets to be shorn away. And so, yeah, this idea of being led by the truth is really important. And I think that will be more accessible with Neptune's square to these 2 points in the galaxy, and also less accessible. So we'll have to really be able to refine that part of us. So now, finally, at the end, moving into look at what Venus is doing for this month. So the very first thing that pops out, of course, is Venus is in Leo. She's at 14 degrees. We've got the moon here. And then also right away, we can see that we have Mars. And this chart for her ingress is very high in fire, like the element of fire. And that speaks to this dimension of the dynamic feminine versus the static feminine. And if you'll recall, we talked about this right at the beginning of our journey about, you know, the Capricorn cycle being the like increasing our capacity to hold. And when we increase our capacity to hold, we increase our capacity to get big, to grow, right? And the dynamic feminine, which is, you know, like a fire-based element, allows us to move, right? So static doesn't denote movement in the same way the dynamic does. And earth doesn't denote movement in the same way fire does. And as we're going to move into this Venus Leo cycle, it's like we're getting a little taster of what the overtone of that cycle is sort of going to be like with this conjunction and with Mars so close by. You know, there's this capacity to act, there's this capacity to respond, there's this capacity towards action, towards doing, towards being penetrated and penetrating other people. And again, these two always elicit the archetypal interplay between the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And in Leo, there's this dimension of really wanting to drop into our erotic innocence. And I don't just mean erotic like sexual innocence. I just mean the innocence that makes us feel alive. Like when we're just truly in our innocence and our joy and can have fun and play. And when we can do that with another person, especially a partner, that is one of the most, I think, joyful parts of being a human and being embodied on this planet at this time. It's just one of my favorite energies to be in, is that like playful, innocent, and to be partnered inside of that, and to really, you know, understand that this energy can help you cultivate that if you are in relationship. And it is asking you or inviting you into cultivating that if you aren't in a relationship. And so that's just a really beautiful signature. And then that idea can be carried forward because it's in the curiosity, it's in that the like innocent and playful, and you know, that dynamism, that real like quantum growth happens, right? So like there's the steady growth like we had in Capricorn of the static feminine that holds the container for like a tree to grow, right? It's like steady, and it's the kind of growth that isn't provoked. It just happens naturally. It governs the cycles that happen naturally. There's no provocation. There's no way to accelerate or elicit more growth. It's the effortless growth, right? But then, you know, in the dynamic elements, in the dynamic flow of life, there certainly is the capacity to elicit growth. And there is this kind of elasticity that happens when we're in our innocence and in that kind of play and fun, that almost childlike mindset that allows growth and realization to come in quickly, right? Like real expanded growth. And so I think this is just such an exciting placement for Venus, and like the idea that it's right here at the gateway on the cusp of the month, I think is going to make the month fun. And then also because we had that Neptune squaring the new moon and the solstice point, Neptune's still in a square here. Neptune, it's still squaring this point, even though it's an out of sign at this point, still a square. There's this capacity to dream and to wonder and to visualize and fantasize. And so I love how these elements are playing off each other, in the sense that like there really is so much possibility in the moment that we're in. And I'm feeling so energized and excited by it. And I really hope that that's translating through this transmission. And so that's Venus and Mars. And then Venus is also in the fire sign, making a trine to Chiron. And oh my God, again, here we have the archetype of the wounded healer and the capacity to meet, integrate, alchemize some of the greater mythological woundings that we have. And what I mean by that is like, so many of us, this is the Chiron thread, have inner wounding and then a mythology, an inner mythology or narrative is grown around that wounding. And it's really hard, especially as adults, to then extract ourselves from that. You know, it's become part of our personal mythos. And in fact, it's so intertwined with who we are. We don't want to take it apart. You know, it's like we sort of wouldn't be who we are without our story, right? It's not the kind of wound that we want to heal, power over, right? It's the kind of wound that we want to meet and integrate and be in relationship with. And the same kind of fire principle of Venus in Leo with that expansion, innocence, play, and that dynamism of the Leonine energy, the dynamic feminine who's really got a lot of fire, the fire that turns to light, meeting Chiron in Aries, the I am essence of I am, and allowing there to be a greater integration there. I think that's so exciting. And then also, so of course, wait, how, sorry. I was looking at the wrong thing. It's the MC of the chart. So yes, she is in a trine to the MC, which also denotes that there's some capacity or some way that we are going to bring this Venusian element out into the world to be seen. There's this way that like the MC denotes the point in the chart where we are most known for who we are. It's like in mundane astrology or in modern astrology, we would call that like a person's job. You know, everybody's known for like by what they do in the world. But in spiritual communities, it's more like, you know, you're just sort of known for who you are. And that's what the MC really represents. So there's like Kate just did that seminar, right? She brought herself out, right, into the world. And, you know, it's sort of like a work-based event, but it was really like a rebirth moment for Kate to like bring herself back out. And so this has that a very similar energy of like wanting to come out of our shell. And Leo is so much that, you know, he wants to be seen, or she, I love Leo as a feminine archetype as well. She wants to be seen. She wants to be noticed. She wants to be on stage. She doesn't mind being the center of attention. And it doesn't have to be in an egoic or narcissistic way. It's in the capacity to receive. It's in the capacity to be received, right? Like to receive love, to receive care and compassion. And yeah, right, the capacity to be seen. So I'm over here like moving my hands so much and I'm realizing it probably looks like a funny little box to the side of the screen. So what else is she doing? So it's counting. This is all one. Yeah, and I suppose it would be. Yeah, a lot of times I look at just 5-degree orbs, but this is a little bit more. It's like a 6-degree orb, but it's counting Lilith and Pallas Athena as part of her energetic signature this month in Leo. And so if we were going to add that in, what does it say? So remember, the exalted form of Pallas Athena is the action of reuniting with our matrilineal line and carrying the thread of deep wisdom out into the world, right? And Black Moon Lilith is that moving beyond the death mother and the kind of currency we put in other people's opinions that keeps us small and frozen and sort of in a state of fear and shame or contraction, right? So Black Moon Lilith, the moon is the all building, all nourishing, all growing archetype. Black Moon Lilith is sort of the antithesis of that, the anti-moon. So she's the contracting, the like getting small. So when we are in our exalted energy of Lilith, we just don't give a shit, right? We don't care what other people think. We're able to bring ourselves out and be like, this is just who I am, take it or leave it. And so that energy is also in the kind of mix with Venus. And, you know, that's not to say that we should, I always want to like add little caveats. It's not to say that we should shove ourselves down anyone's throats. It really is a high skill to be able to speak the truth in a way that lands for other people, and without diluting, right, the message. And so it's a form of like weaving. And as I'm saying this, I'm thinking about Pallas Athena and her action of synthesis and being able to weave, to be a storyteller and, you know, recognize patterns and know how to, essentially, she's like the weaver dreamer archetype, right? And so to know how to bring our truth out and not dilute it in any way, shape, or form, but not also have it be like too unapologetic or in someone's face that it's not clean, right? And other people are like having a negative reaction to it, not to you, but to like the way the thing is, I don't know, showing up, right? And it's because we didn't have the capacity to really hold it, so it got really messy. And of course, if that does happen, you're human and who cares? Move on, clean up your mess, make an apology or whatever, and learn from it, right? And move on. But yeah, so there is this kind of like that energy there. There's the capacity to come out, to maybe feel a little bit more less fearful about being seen, to bring your medicine to the world, but then to also play with that Pallas Athena. That's an exact conjunction archetype of kind of like being able to weave it in a way that it's not compromising for you, and it's also not totally distasteful and unclean in the outer world. Okay, so I've just spoken so much. This is going to be such a busy month. I'll keep dropping in with you guys. I made an invitation on the in the main module about bringing your sun sign and questions about your sun sign into the group if you have them. And you'll understand more about what I mean when you listen to that. So of course, I'd love you to show up and talk in the group. It's just really always fun to engage more deeply with you guys in the time that we're away from each other. We'll see each other Saturday. We have a plan to meet Saturday at 1, and I'd love to see whoever will be there, and maybe we'll play with some astrology, personal chart astrology on that day. And yeah, enjoy the energies. Remember to stay grounded, but remember to also stay elastic and flexible, right? Like that's really, I feel like, the kind of overarching conversation that the stars are having. Like this is going to be a time of huge growth and expansion if we're open and available to it, and to not get carried away. Okay. All right, good. So I will talk to all of you guys soon. If you have any questions about the astrology or something I didn't cover, I'm going to link that Pam Gregory video and the pictures of the resonance on here. All right, I'll talk to you. Bye.